Ori and the Will of the Wisps is my favourite game ever. Released as a sequel for Ori and the Blind Forest, this game came out in March 2020 and blew my mind. I beat the game once on release and was so thoroughly captivated by its world and story that once the credits rolled, I took 10 minutes to stare at my screen and emotionally recover, before immediately pressing new game and starting over. I completed it 3 times on the week of release, ticking off all achievements and falling in love with the game even more each time the credits rolled. With its heart-wrenching story and orchestral soundtrack, the unbelievably satisfying and fluid gameplay, and beautifully coloured world which manages to be both magical and downright terrifying when it wants to be, this game captured me in an emotional rollercoaster that I never wanted to get off. It's incredible, and there's a good reason it was nominated for Best Action Adventure, Best Art Direction, and Best Score and Music at the 2020 Game Awards, as well as awards at both Golden Joystick and Steam. If you haven't played this game before, then I urge you to try it, and if my word isn't enough, then hopefully this video will convince you that it's worth your time. Creating a sequel that captures the spirit of the original and keeps all the best bits, while bringing enough fresh content so it doesn't feel samey, is a tall task that many have tried and failed to achieve. And this definitely isn't specific to games. I think most media struggle with this issue. So, let's uncover how Will of the Wisps manages to be not just an amazing game, but an amazing sequel too. In Ori and the Blind Forest, you travel the land of Nibble to restore 3 lost elements and the light of the spirit tree which was stolen by a giant owl called Kuro. You explore beautiful landscapes and overcome countless hardships on your journey, and the plot takes many twists and turns before coming to a tragic and heroic end, in which Kuro sees the error in her ways and restores the light to the spirit tree, saving the forest of Nibble but killing herself in the process, leaving Ori and their foster parents with Kuro's egg. With a mostly happy ending and the spirit tree restored, all is well. It's just before the credits roll that the egg starts to hatch, the perfect cliffhanger and segue for a sequel. This is as good a time as any to address the fact that this is a fantasy world and the names of the characters and places obviously aren't real, they're made up words. I don't exactly know how to pronounce them all, so Nibble, it could be Nibble, and Nuin, I've called it Nuin, it could be Nywin, Nuin. There's a lot of characters and names. I don't know if I'm getting them all right. I really hope it's not a deal breaker for you. I'm just going to call them Nibble and Nuin. Anyway, back to the actual video. At the start of Will of the Wisps, you launch the game and pick up exactly where you left off. The egg has hatched and out came Ku, the baby owl. This cut between games is perfect. New players who haven't played the first game aren't overwhelmed with too much information to digest. With some light narration that sets the scene, I might even go as far as to say that some new players may not even realise this is the second instalment of the franchise. Players who have played the first game know the history of how the egg and this small family came to be, which, yes, adds more emotional weight to the opening scenes, but is by no means essential information. The game then proceeds with a few nods to the original, but no callbacks or moments that will make the new audience feel like they haven't seen the whole picture. It goes on to expand the universe already set in the first game without recycling the same areas, allowing for completely new level designs. Now, it may seem straight away like I'm giving this platformer too much credit. Since neither of the Ori games use its story as a crutch, dialogue is kept to a minimum and the first game wrapped itself up neatly. So a seamless transition into a sequel in which you don't have to have played the first game may seem like it wouldn't be that difficult. But the way Ori handles this is so elegant and well done that I had to give them credit. It makes both games feel connected. Each one is amazing in its own right and doesn't need the other as a reference, but you could push them together and you wouldn't even know they were different games. That is until we talk about the new things that Will of the Wisps brings to the table. Many of these new elements are what makes this game stand out and reach for heights that the first game didn't, which is saying a lot. Will of the Wisps takes gameplay mechanics and themes from the first game and expands on them. We see abilities and ideas from the Blind Forest brought to life, but even more refined thanks to the expansion of these ideas and level design that lets you push the limits for each ability freely, and the addition of new moves that change the way you use your skills entirely. For example, the ability Light Burst lets you create a projectile to bash from, meaning you can chain your abilities from the first game like dashes and double jumps easier no matter the terrain, but we'll talk more about that later. Ooh, and Light Burst gets bonus points because you can use it as a Molotov as well. Pretty badass. Ori of course starts the game with none of their abilities from the first one, and I've heard the argument before that losing all the protagonist's powers doesn't make sense narratively in a lot of games, but is just standard practice for sequels. I often agree with these points, but in Ori I would argue that after the events of the first game, it would make sense the Tree of Nibble would take back the abilities from Ori. Since these abilities are gifts that Ori inherits and not something that they can just learn and do by themselves, this made sense to me and was never something I had a problem with. This type of ludonarrative dissonance within games, especially sequels, is very common, so isn't something most people will hold against a sequel, but the thumbnail says the best game, so I'm doing my best to cover all bases here. There are lots of elements required to make a good game. The best will be expected to have a unique and well-executed graphic style, a cast of interesting, developed characters, a well-crafted story with satisfying beats and climax, engaging, fun gameplay and level design, excellent sound that immerses the player in the world, and a memorable soundtrack to carry the emotions and feel of the game. Of course, this isn't the case for every type of game. Let's take a game like Tetris, for example. It doesn't exactly have satisfying story beats and a cast of interesting characters, although I bet the L-shaped block Orange Ricky does have some remarkable stories from over the years. The examples I gave are what I would expect from a game like Ori, a single-player action-adventure game. Will of the Wisps excels in every one of these key aspects, and I will do my best to touch on them all. So, I'm no professional artist, and I certainly can't begin to understand the complexities of creating art for a game like this. But what I do know is that 2D games are blessed with opportunity when it comes to art, and Will of the Wisps takes every opportunity to make this game look gorgeous. 2D games have the choice to use 3D models but aren't forced to, and unique hand-drawn art styles are used to make a game stand out from the rest. Ori uses layers beautifully. The background has so many different layers with tons of different moving pieces, and it all adds together to create these magnificent landscapes. The hand-painted graphic style makes every zone feel entirely different from the last, from the frozen woodlands of Ball's Reach to the scorching sunlit dunes of windswept wastes. The art style is consistently breathtaking, and the attention to detail is nothing short of astounding. From the water splashing as Ori spins through a fountain, to the creatures moving around in the backgrounds, the animations are so important in a game like this. When traversal and combat is meant to be fluid and fast-paced, it's so important that the movements of the character feel natural, and the enemy's attacks are well choreographed and possible to read. I don't need to tell you how well the movement is animated. If you've been watching it on the screen, then you'll understand. Just look at the different ways Ori can dismount walls and fly through different zones. And what's just as important for Ori in particular is the animation in the game's story moments. For a game with so little words, it's paramount that the character's emotions can be captured with just visuals and the score. There's rarely voice acting to help the audience, so the music and animation are so important in these moments. The way Ori's ears droop when he's sad and weakened, the way he pricks up and his eyes widen when he's scared, the way the Moki hug their tails when they're grieving, how Naru and Gumo are slow and deliberate when they're worried, Ku all shy when she's embarrassed and upset. They even made Mora the giant spider feel friendly and approachable once she stopped trying to kill you. Just look at those big beady eyes, they're so cute. Alright, I'm willing to admit that one might just be me. I have never experienced a story in any media that tells such a deep and captivating tale with so little words. Let me break it down for you and I'll try to explain why it's so amazing. Ku is born with a broken wing. From the first moments of the game, we can see her desire to fly and the effect it has on her when she can't. She feels like she doesn't belong, and you can see her dealing with the anger of being born the way she is. It wasn't her fault, so why should she be isolated? The weight of these feelings eat away at her as time goes on, and Gumo, Naru, and Ori help all they can, but nothing seems to work. Until Ori finds the feather left by Ku's mother. Using this as a wing, Ku finally takes flight with Ori on her back. Ori saves Ku. They give her hope and make her feel like she belongs in this world. With this newfound confidence and joy, Ku flies the two of them far away, following the birds like she's always wanted to. Until a storm erupts, sending both her and Ori plummeting to the treetops of an unknown place. Far from home, the two characters are separated, and it's up to you as Ori to find Ku again and return to your family. Or at least, that's how it starts. As the game goes on, we learn about a deformed owl called Shriek. Born from the ashes of her own kin, she's alone from the second she's hatched. She wanders the forest looking for, well, anything, and it's when she finds a family of owls that we finally see a glimmer of hope in her eyes. The owls shun her. She doesn't look like them, she's not the same, so she doesn't belong. The hope we saw so briefly fades, and is never to be seen again. Just like Ku, she wanted to belong. It wasn't her fault that she was born the way she was, so why was she being isolated? Without anyone to turn to, Shriek survives alone. For a long time, she learns to live in silence. With darkness being all that she's known, she becomes the embodiment of death, taking life from anything she sees or hears and treating the world the same way the world treated her. Unfairly. Shriek not only symbolises darkness and death, but she shows what Ku could have become without hope or a light to guide her. To me, nothing before this game had ever portrayed the feeling of being so tiny in such a massive world. Ori is so small in the face of everything they stand against, and even in the landscapes they explore, and yet always overcomes that fear of facing things bigger than themselves. Which you can tell Ori feels, not just through their animations, but because that's how the game makes you feel as a player. It's the fear that friend and adopted sister Ku might not be able to fend for herself in the same way that drives the first chapters of the game. You run and fight and survive against any odds to reunite with her, until finally you're together. And you quickly learn that she wasn't as helpless as you had feared. When confronted by Shriek, Ku sets her fear of failure aside and stands up against death. The nervous owlet from before disappears and we see a new side to her. Maybe it's the confidence she found from flying, or maybe it's the fear of losing what little family she has left after hiding in the graveyard of owls she could have known if things had just been different. After losing the one thing they had left, Ori has to decide whether to give up and stop trying to prevent things that might be inevitable, or carry on and try to stop such pain from inflicting the little life that's left in the Forest of Nuit. The Will of the Wisps is a game about loss, the Moki who lost their home and family, the parents who lost their children, and the spirit who lost their friend. The whole game deals with the fear and desperation of being lost, not knowing where you are or where to go. It's a place we've all been. The struggle of making decisions and doing the next right thing when you can no longer see the light or a reason to keep going. The funny thing about this game, and something you'll notice with time, is that you are the light. Ori is the embodiment of life, a literal glowing beacon of hope that the whole forest counts on for a solution. When all seems lost, it's Ori that the creatures of the forest turn to. Though small and afraid, it's Ori that brings hope. And that's exactly why these moments of vulnerability feel so raw and heartbreaking. It's okay to be upset. Life isn't fair, and sometimes the best of us get the least time. In killing Ku, Shriek abandons any chance of redemption. She will never trust the light, and the light will never trust her. The rest of the story sees Ori collecting 5 wisps from different areas of Nuin. You see, every land in Ori's universe is looked after by a spirit tree, and each spirit tree has a light. The trees provide life to their respective lands, looking after all the creatures and eventually birthing spirit guardians such as Ori. The land of Nibble, where the first game takes place, has a great tall tree resembling an oak, and the land of Nuin, a giant willow. Nuin was once a happy place, beaming with life until, over time, the willow grew old and withered. Unable to look after its light, it shattered into 5 pieces, which were lost throughout the land. After losing Ku, Ori is urged to gather the 5 pieces known as the Wisps and return them to the willow with the hope that it could restore balance to the land and life to those who had lost it. A majority of the game from here is spent collecting these wisps, and once they're restored, you travel to the willow to give back its light. The willow rejects it. It's too old and withered and worries it won't be able to protect the light the same as last time. It gives the light back to Ori, and this is when Shriek appears, stealing the light and throwing it away. When confronted, this time Ori doesn't run and hide. A fight between life and death ensues, and you play part in a beautifully choreographed battle. As difficult as it is scary, this fight scene still makes me jump when I play it. Shriek's noises as she flies towards the screen or towards Ori are terrifying, and yet this stage is so enjoyable to bounce around as you dodge attacks and wait for your openings. You'll fight, then run, then fight again until Shriek is finally defeated and she crashes to the ground. Mortally wounded, she crawls her way to the Silent Woods and lies down to die the same way she was born, beneath the wings of her dead parents. Ori is wounded, and we watch as they play back memories of the forest in their mind. Not only to remember what had been, but to remember all the good that would be lost if the forest should die. Ori knows what they have to do. They climb atop the light and become one with it. The little spirit born from the tree of Nibble, lost in the storm, makes the ultimate sacrifice, absorbing the light of the spirits and becoming the new tree of Nuin. With this strength, Ori restores life to Ku, and with their family beside them, they look after the light for many years, giving life back to the once ruined land of Nuin. We see Naru and Gumo grow old beneath the branches of Ori. We see Ku all grown, flying in the distance. And along with this powerful ending, we discover that it was Ori narrating his story throughout the whole game. Sacrifice. The second theme of Will o' the Wisps is sacrifice. You can see this throughout the whole game, but primarily in the story beats. Quarlock's sacrifice to find the strength of the forest and defeat the parasite. Ku's sacrifice to defend you from Shriek. Ori's sacrifice to restore life to Nuin. Hell, even in the gameplay, you sacrifice energy to heal, spirit light for upgrades, and some shards even let you sacrifice health for strength. These decisions characters make not only create good story arcs and memorable moments, but they help the world of Ori feel worth saving. This game is about saving the forest. Players will accept that and push on, because saving the forest seems like the right thing to do. But making the forest seem like a place worth saving is something Ori does very well, especially considering the minimal dialogue throughout the whole game. Many areas of the game are withered and devoid of life, which makes the prospering areas feel 10 times as bright and marvellous. The remaining life in the land stick together and do their best to use their skills to benefit everyone. The Moki can be found exploring the land and always have something to say regarding their surroundings or their wishes. This Moki, called Mock the Brave, wants you to find a Howl Fang, so he can show it to his friend and brag about how brave he is. This guy asks you to send message to his family that they can move into his new home. You arrive at their place in the Silent Woods to find them turned to stone in the decay, and have to deliver him the news. When Quarlock dies, this Moki wants to pay respects, but can't travel back to the marsh, so you can do it for him. In fact, there's a handful of side quests like these, the largest being a trading quest called Hand to Hand, where you'll receive an item and then bump into a character on your travels who will trade it for something else, which you can then trade to someone else for a different item later, and so on. This Moki is freezing and needs some hot soup, so you trade some for a comfy hat. This Moki wants a comfy hat, so trades it for a lantern. This Moki needs a lantern to help him through the dark, so he trades it for some silk, and so on. This quest may seem mundane at first, but it's these little displays of life that make the world feel lived in and alive with creatures who think and care. All of this shows that there is still hope and love, and not just in the land, but for it too. When it comes to gameplay, the word that describes this game best, and yet still feels like an understatement, is fluid, which is why I've used the word multiple times already. As I mentioned before, Ori uses layers really well, and not just for artistic reasons, but traversal too. Platforms like this one you can either jump on or run straight through without it breaking your momentum. And this isn't a one-off, there's tons of this throughout the world, and it strikes a great balance of being both visually pleasing and yet obvious which platforms you can jump on and which you can't. The game gives you new movement options and abilities throughout. Before you even begin to think the gameplay is getting stale, it hits you with a brand new ability that more often than not changes how you interact with the whole map. You know those blue plant thingies that you've been spotting around the place? Well, here's an ability that lets you grapple to them. Enjoy. Double jump? No problem. Wall running, bashing, dashing, down smashing, you name it, we've got it. Let's use this area as an example. Here's a few different ways you can get from A to B. The point I'm trying to make here is that there's a million different ways of doing just this one part, and there's a huge map to play with. Having all these options makes you feel like you can traverse the whole map without even touching the ground. It's so insanely fulfilling. This could just be the game and I would be happy. The great level design means that you always feel like you can push these abilities to the max. You rarely feel limited in your options. In fact, the only area I can think of that didn't give me 100 different movement options is Silent Woods with the Ku sequence. Thankfully, this part doesn't overstay its welcome and introduces a nice change of pace even if it limits you to certain movements. Even the water zones let you dash, bash, and dive to your heart's content, and we all know how much water levels can suck, so making them fun is no mean feat. Movement has weight. If you compare it to movement in a game like Hollow Knight, you can see that it feels more smooth. I would describe Hollow Knight as a precise platformer. It's very sharp and you can change direction quickly in midair, whereas Ori uses weight and momentum. In a game like Hollow Knight that's centered around fast-paced combat and quick movements, being able to make quick direction changes in midair is important. When enemies' attacks are fast and relentless, it's critical that the player can make quick changes to their movements at all times. Ori is different. The jumps are bouncy and you can't make sharp turns in midair without the use of dashes and other abilities, which again affect your momentum and can be used in a variety of different ways. It really is the movement that has Ori feel different from a lot of other platformers, and whether you like it or not, it's hard to argue that this game should play any other way. It suits the rest of the game. With set pieces like this, I can't imagine the gameplay working with any other movement system. The constant need to maintain momentum during these moments gives them an urgency that just wouldn't be present with a sharper movement system like Hollow Knight, or any number of other 2D platformers. I only realised this after collecting and organising all of the recordings for this video, but this game lets you quick access things like time trials, bosses, escape sequences, and memories, so that's story moments and cutscenes. Being able to launch the game and practice your time trials immediately is so cool. Time trials are an awesome part of the game that let you race against other players in certain areas. They're so fun and seriously addicting. There's also a backup save option, so you can go to and from your previous saves. This is such a neat feature that so many games with an autosave like this just wouldn't bother with. I cannot understate how helpful both the quick access and backup save features would have been if I'd known about them before recording for this video. I would have saved so much time, but that is my fault, and I'm really glad these features exist anyway. Combat in Will of the Wisps is one of the main areas in which it has improved vastly from the first game. This game gives you options. You have a variety of weapons to choose from, which paired with different skills and shards can give you tons of different synergies and combinations. The hammer feels heavy and powerful, the sword is quick and nimble, making flip resets and air juggling easier. The spear lets you suspend yourself in the air while you aim powerful shots, and the bow takes care of distant mobs and buttons. Shards are found as you explore the world. Each one gives you a unique bonus that you can equip and swap throughout the game. Whether it's a new ability or a buff of some kind, these let you change up your playstyle however you like and adapt to situations as you see fit. Collectibles in Ori are great, especially from a completionist perspective. A lot of games with collectibles will expect you to find them just because you're a completionist. Of course you're going to find them. We'll give you a trophy after you find everything, and if you're lucky you'll get a sticker or a crappy in-game item. It always becomes a grind, and in most games you end up frustrated towards the end. Ori makes collectibles fun. When each item contributes towards your strength, either in health, energy, or spirit light for upgrades, players feel motivated to find these items because they have a use, most times immediately. Other collectibles include Gorlek ore, which lets you upgrade your central hub in the Glades, and shard slot upgrades that let you use more shards at once. You know a game has done collectibles well when you enjoy searching for them not just because they're fun to find, but because they're actually useful once collected and you feel rewarded for your efforts. Music is subjective. Everyone has things they like and don't like. I can describe to you how this soundtrack makes me feel, but there's a good chance it will make you feel differently. Or you'll take things from it that I didn't. I'm sure you've been listening to the score in the background already and have come to your own conclusions, so I won't bore you with description, but let me show you this. Ori's theme is played throughout the whole game. It's the most recognisable of the franchise. Players of the Blind Forest will associate this track with the emotions and context of that game, but it's just as powerful by itself here. It weaves its way into tons of tracks throughout the game, and maybe without them even realising, this melody becomes the sound of hope, adventure, heroism, and bravery to the player. Ku's theme is soft and mellow, and plays through most of her story moments, including a sadder rendition when she dies. And and Shriek's theme is similar to Q's, once again displaying the parallels and similarities of the two characters. It's actually the same melody but with harsher instruments and deeper tones. The music in this game takes you on a journey, and the best example of this is in the final battle. When the fight begins, we hear Shriek's theme play, the orchestra empowering us with its myriad instruments weaving together the dark and powerful tune we've come to recognise. But this time we hear remnants of Kuro's theme from the Blind Forest, reminding us of our previous battles. The fight is long and grueling, and just as you start to think that Shriek might be too strong and the game has bested you, Ori's theme breaks through the orchestra. Well, hey, we did it! We made it to the unscripted part of the video where I say a huge thank you to everyone watching. I had so much fun making this video. It was amazing to play through the games again, just remember why I loved them so much. I think the first game came out at a time that I needed it, and it really spoke to me, and so I was so excited for the second game to come out, and it just didn't disappoint. It's such an incredible game that it's my favourite because I can pick it up anytime and still have as much fun with it as I did the first time. The movement and everything is just so incredibly fun. But you know that I just did a whole video on it, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you know, like it if you liked it and dislike if you didn't. I want to get some discussion going. If any of you have played the game or you want to now, let me know in the comments. If you disagree with any of the things I said, then please let me know. This is all my opinions, and yes, I'm biased because I just have emotions for this game that a lot of people probably don't. So yeah, let's get talking about it and play this game if you haven't. I really think that if you can get through this whole game, listen to the soundtrack, play all the story beats and not feel anything, then you should probably call a doctor because something is definitely wrong. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya!